Hey there, welcome to CandTCollectibles. I'm C. Hope you're doing well. Congratulations to Fred McGriff for making the Hall of Fame, first member of the class of 2023, elected by the Contemporary Era Committee for Major League Baseball. They meet every few years. They alternate with some of the other committees to perhaps right previous wrongs or something like that. So I want to look at a couple of guys today. For the most recent ballot, there were some candidates, possible candidates. You had 8 players, and a few of them you can eliminate right off the bat. I mean, it's really going to be up to the discretion of the I think it's a 16-person committee. 12 of them have to vote positively to get anybody in. So Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Rafi Palmeiro, they've got their issues, and it might take some time to get them in. Then you have Kurt Schilling, who he opened his mouth a bit, and so I think the people are the voters are giving him what he wants, which is a committee vote, and they may make him wait just a little bit. And then you have Albert Bell and Don Mattingly, who cut their careers short due to injury. So nothing that they did. If they had a more longevity, then I think they would have some realistic shots. But as it stands right now, probably not seriously serious contenders. So I think the two that people were really looking for were Fred McGriff and Dale Murphy. So let's just take a look a little bit deeper and see if they got them right. I've talked about these players before in some of my videos and thought Fred McGriff he had a pretty reasonable chance and he'd probably get in. Dale Murphy, I also thought would get in. Not that I think he should be in, but that he would get in because of a couple of the MVPs that he has. So hardware makes a difference, but I felt he showed up a little bit light in some other metrics. So real quick, Fred McGriff, 2,500 hits, nearly 500 home runs, very long career, 5 All-Star games, 3 Silver Sluggers, overall 134 weighted runs created, 886 OPS, and 57 wins above replacement. The 57 wins above replacement is kind of the outlier in all this. If you look at first basemen that have been elected within the last, really since 1980, a lot of the big bats in there, they're upwards of at least 70. You have Tony Perez, which is just slightly higher, and so he's at that lower tier of Hall of Fame first baseman, and that's why he didn't get in the first time. And so they went back and said, for what he did during that era, he's probably deserving. So if you look at the guys elected since 1980, the hits are similar, the average home runs similar. He's got them in Silver Sluggers a bit here. Some of those players that were elected, like Harmon Gilbert, the Silver Slugger wasn't around, or Gold Glove wasn't around for them. So relatively similar in All-Star game appearances, but again, the wins above replacement a little bit light. But if you break down the jaws and how he compares those guys, again, he's kind of on the outside edge. Nice to see Baseball References immediately updated that Hall of Fame stat here. So again, compares favorably to Tony Perez, who was voted in. And so this is realistic. No one should have a huge problem with this one here. What it does do is really bolster the case for Paul Goldschmidt and Joey Votto overall, who had tremendous peaks. But as that wins above replacement gets ratcheted down a little bit, you can look for players with sub 60, like a Todd Helton, possibly getting in as well. So he's got 50% of the vote, and typically when you hit that number, you get in. There's no player that hasn't been associated with PEDs that hasn't had that happen. So the case for Fred McGriff is at least solid for lower end Hall of Famer, but Hall of Famer nonetheless, and that's a terrific accomplishment, and everybody should be pretty happy for the guy here. So Dale Murphy's a little harder case here. I think there's a lot of emotion around this. He was with the Braves in the 80s. We all grew up with TBS watching Braves games and WGN watching Cubs games, so we saw him a ton. He has a couple of MVPs, which is what people kind of hang their hat on for him here. If you look at his numbers overall, they're pretty good for a catcher. Okay, 2,100 hits would rank fairly high. The home runs would be way up there. However, he played catcher for his first 2 seasons, moved to first base for a season, and the rest of his career was spent in the outfield. And so I think you have to compare him to outfielders where these numbers are not as favorable. You really want to be upwards of 2,500 hits, over 400 home runs, or a ton of Gold Gloves. Got to get that defense in there. He's got a number of Gold Gloves, but if you look at his defensive metrics, not the greatest overall, but again, he's the hardware nonetheless. 4 Silver Sluggers, 119 weighted runs created. So again, if you're not this outstanding defender, Willie Mays, Andrew Jones type, then you have to hang your hat on the defense, which he was not able to do compared to other outfielders that are already in the Hall of Fame. Decent OPS and 44 wins above replacement, which is very low. Again, even if you're putting him up against the catchers, that's a fairly low number. he'd be basically Brian McCann for the most part. But again, with those MVPs, a lot of people are saying, you know what, he won them back to back. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Well, let's look at those MVPs in 1982 National League leaders. He ranks fifth overall in terms of weighted runs created, in terms of wins above replacement, wins above weighted runs created, right in that similar area, a little bit better than the Hawk overall, but it in no way was he near the top of the league. And so what they looked for back in the day, if you had home runs, a number of home runs, that was typically the person who was going to get the nod. And so he had a decent average, high number of home runs. I think only Dave Kingman had more that season. But I think you can make the case for other players being the MVP. So this was maybe one of the weaker selections as the MVP ballot has got a little bit more evolved and people start to look at wins above replacement, weighted runs created. There's other things that come into play. And so he had a very fine season. That's a terrific season by any metric. But I think there's other players that could have a claim here. Maybe Mike Schmidt should have had his fourth in that case in 1983. More reasonable. Probably should be MVP on that one here. So only one player had a higher weighted runs created, and that was Mike Schmidt, and so he was right in there with wins above replacement. You could kind of flip a coin. I think the break even on that one was batting average. Again, they're looking at home runs, they're looking at batting average, and then not much else for the most part. And they also gave out Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers, based on how well you hit. Silver Slugger makes sense, but the Gold Glove not so much. A lot of questionable decisions on that one. So 1983 probably pretty reasonable. And so if he was a single MVP guy, there's a number of those players who did not get in. And so I think it's going to be, as people dig into the numbers a bit more, maybe a little bit tougher. I thought this was a really good chance for him that it didn't happen. The road gets really, really tough for him going forward here. And you can see with his Jaws, this is a combination of their best 7 years. Doesn't have to be consecutive. And also their career lifetime WAR. So he's on the outside looking in here. You have your clear-cut Hall of Famers. This does a pretty good job, but it's not perfect, right? But it does a pretty good job of saying who should be in the Hall of Fame. And you can see the names up top. Pretty clear Hall of Famers here. Carlos Beltran probably at some point gets in. Some of these other players have a case. I think Andrew Jones gets in. Kenny Lofton is a player that I think deserves a little bit longer look. But then you have then you start to get into Dale Murphy into this territory. And because he spent so much time in the outfield, you can't give him that catcher discount or anything like that. So I think, again, that's going to be a little bit of a uphill climb. I think the voters did a nice job with this one. With McGriff getting in, fine, no problems on that one, and Dale Murphy missing by a bit. It's like the Hall of Fame became the Hall of Very Good a long time ago, but we can still kind of delineate between the two, I think, at times, and this was one of those cases. So that's what I got for you. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.